Do you think folklore is just stories? Ancient tales passed down to frighten children and entertain around campfires? What if I told you that some legends aren't creations of human imagination, but desperate attempts to warn us about something real? Something that's been watching us from the periphery of our existence for centuries. I've spent the last 14 months researching a figure that appears across cultures, across time, known by different names, but always with the same impossible characteristics. Today I'm going to share what I've found about the entity most recently called the Jangly Man. The evidence might disturb you. The implications will certainly haunt you. But the truth needs to be revealed. The earliest documented encounter dates back to 1687 in a small village outside Strasbourg. Local records describe a series of disappearances that coincided with what villagers described as a man of impossible length whose limbs made sounds like bells beneath the skin. 7 children vanished over 3 weeks. The official explanation from authorities cited wolf attacks, common enough in rural Europe at that time. But parish records tell a different story. Father Matthias Brenner wrote in his private journal, sealed until 1922, about interviewing the only witness, a 10-year-old girl named Elise Gruber, who claimed to have seen the abduction of her brother. The child speaks of a tall figure that did not walk properly, Brenner wrote. She describes arms that bent where arms should not bend, and legs that twisted in impossible directions. Most disturbing was her insistence that it made sounds like small bells with each movement, though no actual bells were visible. Brenner's journal ends abruptly 3 days later. The final entry reads only, "It watches from reflections. God forgive me for looking too long." The authorities found Brenner's body 2 days later in the church bell tower. The official cause of death was listed as suicide. No note was found. His eyes had been removed, though this detail was redacted from public records until historians uncovered the original documents in 1978. The missing children were never found. For more than a century, the records fall silent. Perhaps people learned not to document what they saw. Perhaps those who did simply disappeared. But in 1793, during the height of the French Revolution, accounts resurface in a most unexpected place: the classified journals of Antoine Laurent Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry. Lavoisier, known for his scientific rigor, documented a series of observations in his laboratory that he shared with no one. These notes, separate from his published scientific work, were discovered in 1928, sealed in a lead box behind a stone in his former laboratory's foundation during renovation. What he described defies rational explanation, which is likely why he kept these observations secret. The figure appears in reflective surfaces after prolonged observation, he wrote. Initially, I believed it to be an effect of eye strain, or perhaps mercury poisoning common in our profession. However, controlled tests have eliminated these possibilities. The entity seems to exist in a state of dimensional inconsistency. Its limbs move at angles prohibited by human anatomy. Most curious is the auditory phenomenon, a distinct jangling, like small metal components striking one another within the flesh itself, though no external cause is visible. Lavoisier described setting up an experiment with multiple mirrors to observe the entity more thoroughly. The notes become increasingly erratic after this point. His final entry, dated 1 week before his arrest during the Reign of Terror, contains this chilling passage. It is aware of observation. Last night it turned its head completely backward to face me, though its body remained oriented away. I have sealed these notes and will speak of this to no one. Some phenomena should remain unstudied. Lavoisier was executed by guillotine in May 1794. Historical accounts attribute his death to political reasons, but the timing following his observations raises questions. The official who ordered his execution, despite appeals from other scientists, reportedly stated, "The Republic has no need of scientists." This same official was found dead 3 weeks later, his body discovered in a locked room with all mirrors shattered. The cause of death was recorded as unknown. The phenomenon remained largely undocumented throughout the 19th century, appearing only in scattered personal diaries and private correspondence, typically followed by the writer's disappearance or death. These cases might have remained disconnected historical curiosities if not for the emergence of film technology in the late 1800s. In 1901, pioneering filmmaker Georges Méliès was working on a series of experimental films involving mirror effects when production suddenly halted. Méliès destroyed several reels of footage and refused to discuss the project with anyone. His financial backer, frustrated by the wasted investment, wrote in a letter to his wife, "Méliès has gone mad. He claims something appeared in the film that none of us placed there. A figure he calls l'homme désarticulé, the disjointed man. He burned the negatives himself and shattered every mirror in the studio." Méliès never worked with reflective surfaces in his films again, switching entirely to painted backdrops and practical effects. When asked years later about the abandoned project, he would only say, "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again." He lived until 1938, but friends noted he covered or removed all mirrors in his home and would not look directly into camera lenses or any reflective surface. The first half of the 20th century saw the phenomenon retreat into obscurity again. Perhaps world wars provided enough real horror that people paid less attention to unexplained shadows in mirrors, or perhaps the entity was simply watching, waiting, learning. The modern documentation begins in earnest in 1953 in classified Project Blue Book files that were never meant to see public release. Lieutenant Colonel James Henderson was assigned to investigate reports of strange phenomena near Groom Lake, Nevada. The official investigation concerned potential Soviet aircraft activity, but Henderson's personal notes tell a different story. "The witnesses describe something that moves like a broken marionette," he wrote. "Multiple joints, impossible angles, the sound of small metal components hitting each other with each movement. It's always seen at the edge of mirrors, in peripheral vision, or in developed photographs where no figure was present during shooting. 3 personnel have gone missing after reporting these sightings. General, name redacted, has ordered all mirrors removed from the facility and photo development strictly controlled." Henderson himself disappeared 2 weeks later while driving between the testing facility and Las Vegas. His vehicle was found abandoned on a desert road, the rearview mirror torn out and missing. The official report lists him as AWOL, later changed to presumed dead, when no trace was ever found. His notes were sealed until 2007, when a Freedom of Information Act request by researcher Martin Keller uncovered them. Keller published a small academic paper on the Henderson case in an obscure paranormal research journal in 2009. 3 weeks after publication, Keller's apartment caught fire while he slept. His body was never recovered. The digital records of his research were corrupted beyond recovery in what the university's IT department called the strangest data degradation they'd ever seen. The 1970s brought a cluster of sightings across New England, beginning with the case of the Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts. Staff reported patients speaking of the jangling man who comes through the mirrors, initially dismissed as shared. Psychosis among the mentally ill patients. The phenomenon gained credibility when Dr. Eleanor Harding, the hospital's chief psychiatrist, documented her own experience. "I observed the figure myself last night while working late," she wrote in a report later classified by the state health department. "It appeared in my office mirror, standing behind me though I was alone in the room. The proportions were wrong, too tall, limbs too long, with far too many joints. The sound it made was like small bones or metal pieces rattling inside its body with each movement. When I turned, nothing was there, but when I faced the mirror again, it was closer. I've ordered all reflective surfaces covered or removed from patient areas." 3 days after filing her report, Dr. Harding took an unexpected leave of absence. She never returned to her position and was found 2 weeks later in her home, dead from what was officially ruled as suicide. The autopsy noted severe dehydration and malnutrition, suggesting she had not eaten or drunk anything for several days before death. All mirrors in her home had been covered with black paint. On her bathroom wall, written in what forensic analysis confirmed was her own blood, were the words, "It comes through when you look too long." The hospital administration buried Dr. Harding's report, but 7 more staff members resigned in the following month, each citing personal reasons. Danvers State Hospital was shut down in 1992, though official reasons cited budget cuts and changing approaches to mental health treatment. Urban explorers who illegally entered the abandoned building in the late 1990s frequently reported feeling watched, particularly in rooms with remaining mirror fragments. 3 separate groups of explorers, totaling 7 people, disappeared between 1998 and 2001 after visiting the hospital. Local authorities barricaded the site more securely after the 3rd incident, attributing the disappearances to structural collapses. The first official naming of the Jangly Man occurred in 1987 in a series of child disappearances in suburban Colorado. 7 children vanished over 4 months, all last seen in their bedrooms at night. The only witness was 9-year-old Timothy Reeves, who shared a room with his brother Michael, the final victim. According to police interview transcripts, Timothy told detectives, "The Jangly Man came out of our mirror. He's all bendy and wrong. His arms and legs go in directions they shouldn't. He makes sounds like mom's wind chimes when he moves, but the sounds come from inside him. He took Michael. He showed Michael something in the mirror first, and Michael's eyes got all black. And then he took him." Timothy's parents had the mirror removed immediately, but child psychologists attributed the description to trauma and an overactive imagination. The official investigation focused on conventional explanations: a human kidnapper, potentially someone who worked in schools or children's activities. No suspects were ever identified. No bodies were ever found. Timothy Reeves maintained his account into adulthood. At age 32, he self-published a memoir titled The Jangly Man Took My Brother, which sold fewer than 500 copies. 3 weeks after publication, Reeves was found dead in his apartment bathroom. The official cause was listed as an accidental slip and fall that resulted in fatal head trauma. Friends reported that Reeves had become increasingly paranoid in the weeks before his death, covering all reflective surfaces in his home and refusing to look at screens or windows after dark. His final social media post, made the night before his death, read only, "I've said too much. It found me again." Throughout the 1990s, the legend began appearing on early internet forums dedicated to paranormal phenomena. Most accounts were clearly fabrications or creepypasta-style fiction. But buried among them were detailed testimonies with common elements that matched historical documentation no public forum user should have been able to access. The distinctive jangling sound from within the entity's body, the impossible joint movements, the connection to prolonged observation of reflective surfaces. In 1998, a user with the handle Mirror Watcher posted a detailed account of encountering the entity on 3 consecutive nights. "It appears after you stare into a mirror in dim light for more than 3 minutes, they wrote. "First night, just a glimpse at the edge of the reflection. Second night, it's visible behind you, but retreats when you turn around. Third night, it approaches in the reflection. Never look at it for a third night. I'm posting this from a public library computer. I've removed all reflective surfaces from my home, but I don't think it matters now. It's noticed me noticing it." The account was never active again after that single post. Internet archivists who attempted to trace the user found the library had no record of who had used the computer at that time, and security footage from that day was missing due to what was described as a power fluctuation that affected only the camera system. By the early 2000s, digital photography and CCTV were becoming ubiquitous, yet verifiable images of the entity remained elusive. Those claiming to have photographic evidence invariably reported that the images corrupted or degraded soon after being taken. Several researchers attempting to document the phenomenon systematically disappeared or died under circumstances ruled as suicide, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Professor Marion Kemp of Duke University's Parapsychology Department began the most comprehensive academic study in 2007. Her team collected historical accounts, analyzed patterns, and attempted to establish protocols for safely observing reflective surfaces for extended periods. 6 months into the study, Kemp's research assistant David Chen stopped showing up for work. Police found his Apartment empty, with no signs of struggle but every reflective surface shattered. His laptop contained a video file that showed only static when analyzed, though metadata indicated it was a 78-minute recording. Professor Kemp herself published one preliminary paper that referred obliquely to a reflection-based visual phenomenon with shared characteristics across historical accounts. 3 days after publication, she canceled all classes and research activities. Campus security conducted a wellness check after she missed a department meeting and found her office barricaded from inside. When they finally gained entry, Kemp was found huddled in a corner, severely dehydrated and suffering from apparent psychosis. Medical records indicate she repeated only one phrase during her initial evaluation. "It's not in the mirrors. The mirrors are just where it can reach through." Kemp was institutionalized for 6 months and upon release immediately resigned her position, moved to rural Maine, and has refused all contact with former colleagues. Her research materials were sealed by the university after 3 separate graduate students working to catalog them reported experiencing vivid nightmares and seeing movement in reflective surfaces. The phenomenon gained renewed attention in 2014 following a cluster of disappearances in Pacific Northwest suburbs. 5 children vanished from separate homes over 2 months, all between the ages of 7 and 11. The case received national media attention when security footage from one home showed something unusual. The grainy nighttime video from the Murray family's hallway camera showed their 9-year-old daughter Emily standing before the bathroom mirror at 2:17 a.m. The footage shows her staring into the mirror for approximately 4 minutes before something moves within the reflection, something tall with limbs that bend at impossible angles. The video distorts with static at this point, and when it clears 7 seconds later, Emily is gone. Police analysts ruled the footage had been tampered with, though they couldn't explain how or by whom. The Murray family insisted the footage was authentic. 3 weeks into the investigation, lead detective Robert Faraday held a press conference where he stated they were pursuing several leads but required more time. That evening, Faraday didn't return home. His car was found, parked outside his house, driver's door open, keys in the ignition. Inside his home, every mirror was shattered. On his bathroom wall, written in marker, "I saw it too." The FBI took over the case but never identified a suspect. All 5 children remain missing. The Murray family's security footage disappeared from evidence storage 3 days after Detective Faraday vanished. The official explanation cited evidence mishandling. Unofficial copies that circulated briefly online became corrupted, with viewers reporting the video would play normally until the mirror scene, then degrade into unwatchable static followed by their devices malfunctioning. In 2018, the phenomenon entered wider public consciousness through social media and streaming platforms. A TikTok challenge called mirror gazing encouraged users to stare into mirrors in dim light and record their reactions. Most videos showed nothing but teenagers scaring themselves, but several were removed by the platform after users reported disturbing content. In each removed video, according to viewer comments, something appeared in the mirror that wasn't in the room, something tall with too many joints that moved with a subtle jangling sound. TikTok issued a statement discouraging the challenge for safety reasons, but did not elaborate further. Archived copies of the removed videos circulate occasionally on obscure forums, but invariably become corrupted within days of being shared. Users who claim to have seen the uncorrupted footage describe similar details. A figure with impossible joint configurations, subtle movements at the edge of the mirror, and a distinctive sound, like tiny metal components shifting inside the entity's limbs. The name, the Jangly Man, became firmly established in 2019 when streaming horror anthology series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark featured an entity by that name. The film version portrayed the creature as a contortionist-like monster that could disassemble and reassemble itself with joints that bent in impossible directions. What most viewers don't know is that 3 different actors were originally cast for the role, each leaving the production after reporting strange experiences, including seeing movements in their dressing room mirrors and hearing unexplained jangling sounds on set when no one was in costume. The final actor who completed filming, Troy James, gave only one interview about the experience before declining all further press opportunities. In that interview, he stated, "There's something about holding that position, with your body all twisted up in that unnatural way. It's like you're making a door. I wouldn't do it again for any amount of money." James canceled convention appearances and reportedly moved to a remote area of Canada where, according to former colleagues, he doesn't keep mirrors in his house anymore. What's most disturbing about the film version is how closely it matches historical descriptions from centuries before, details the production designers claim to have created independently. When online commenters pointed out the similarities to obscure historical accounts, the film's writer claimed any resemblance was completely coincidental. He's declined all interviews about the subject since the film's release and reportedly sought treatment for insomnia and anxiety. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020-2022 saw an unexpected surge in reported encounters. As people spent unprecedented time isolated in their homes, often with increased screen time and video calls, sightings increased dramatically. Mental health professionals attributed this to heightened anxiety, isolation, and the psychological effects of seeing one's own reflection more frequently during video conferences. But those who encountered the entity described consistent details that matched historical accounts dating back centuries. Support groups formed online for those who claimed to have seen the Jangly Man, though many used code names and euphemisms like the reflection entity or the jointed one out of expressed fear that naming it directly would draw its attention. These communities documented hundreds of sightings with consistent patterns. The entity first appears at the periphery of reflective surfaces after prolonged viewing, gradually becoming more central and distinct over subsequent viewings. The final stage, which survivors only knew secondhand from witnesses who later disappeared, involved the entity approaching close to the reflective surface from within. Dr. Hannah Montgomery, a psychological researcher at Columbia University, began studying these communities in late 2021. Her initial hypothesis was that they represented a digital age form of folie à deux, a shared delusion spread through online interaction. But as her research progressed, Montgomery noted disturbing consistencies that couldn't be explained by social contagion alone, particularly among isolated individuals who reported encounters before finding the online communities. The behavioral patterns among witnesses are remarkably consistent, she wrote in research notes obtained after her disappearance. They begin avoiding reflective surfaces, covering mirrors, and disabling front-facing cameras. Even those with no prior history of mental illness report the same progression of encounters, using nearly identical language to describe the entity's movements and the distinctive sound it produces, like small components shifting within its joints. Montgomery's research took an alarming turn when she set up controlled observation sessions using two-way mirrors. Participants were asked to gaze into mirrors for increasing durations while being monitored. According to her notes, 37% of participants reported seeing something unusual after 3 or more minutes of continuous observation. 3 participants became extremely distressed, with 1 breaking the mirror before staff could intervene. The most disturbing incident occurred during the 17th session. Participant number 31, whose name was redacted from the records, was 4 minutes into mirror observation when monitoring equipment detected an anomaly. Temperature sensors registered a 13-degree temperature drop directly in front of the mirror's surface. Audio equipment captured what technicians initially classified as interference, but later analysis identified as a rhythmic metallic sound, occurring in conjunction with subtle movements reflected in the mirror that had no counterpart in the actual room. The participant began screaming and couldn't be calmed. According to staff reports, she repeatedly stated, "It knows you're watching too. It can see through cameras. It comes through any reflection if you look too long." Dr. Montgomery suspended the study immediately. Her final research notes, dated 3 days before her disappearance, contain this disturbing passage. "I've begun seeing it in reflective surfaces in my home. First, the bathroom mirror, then the microwave door, then my phone screen. Each time it's closer, more distinct. The sound is unmistakable, like tiny metal parts shifting inside its limbs with each movement. I've covered everything reflective in my apartment. I'm writing this by candlelight to avoid screen reflection. I don't think it will be enough. Montgomery was reported missing when she failed to appear for a department meeting. Police found her apartment empty, with mirrors covered by black cloth and electronic screens face down or disabled. Her laptop contained corrupted video files that technical analysts were unable to recover. She remains missing as of this recording. In 2023, an anonymous whistleblower claiming to be a former government researcher posted documents purportedly from a classified project called Glass Door that operated from 1971 to 2004. While the authenticity of these documents cannot be verified, they contain detailed protocols for military personnel regarding prolonged observation of reflective surfaces. These protocols explicitly warn against mirror gazing for more than 3 minutes and mandate that all observation of unusual phenomena in reflective surfaces must be conducted with multiple observers present. One document, labeled Incident Report 17B, describes an apparent containment breach at a facility in Redacted, Virginia. According to the report, a research subject made contact with the mirror anomaly after extended observation and subsequently disappeared while under video surveillance. The report notes, subject was observed, approaching the mirror surface at 002.17. Video monitoring equipment registered severe interference at this point. When signal stabilized at 002.19, subject was no longer present in the sealed room. Mirror surface was intact with no signs of physical breach. Audio equipment captured approximately 4.7 seconds of what analysis confirms matches previous recordings of the entity's distinctive locomotion sounds. The whistleblower's account and documents disappeared from the internet less than 48 hours after posting. Those who downloaded copies reported that the files became corrupted, showing only static or random characters when opened. The individual behind the leak has never been identified, though 3 former government employees who worked in special projects divisions died under unusual circumstances in the month following the leak, 2 apparent suicides, and 1 heart attack. All 3 had removed or covered all reflective surfaces in their homes prior to their deaths, according to family members. Which brings us to the present day. Reports continue to emerge globally, with consistent details across cultural and geographic boundaries. The pattern remains the same: prolonged observation of reflective surfaces, the gradual appearance of an entity with impossible joint configurations, the distinctive jangling sound, and ultimately, for those who observe it too often or too long, disappearance. Why am I sharing this information when those who document this phenomenon so often vanish? Because the evidence suggests the entity's power is growing. Historical accounts describe it appearing only after extended mirror gazing in specific conditions. Modern reports indicate shorter required observation times and appearances in a wider variety of reflective surfaces, from traditional mirrors to digital screens, from window reflections to still water. What is the Jangly Man? Historical occultists described it as an entity that exists between dimensions, using reflective surfaces as gateways. Modern theoretical physicists who've studied the phenomenon, often anonymously, suggest it might represent a form of interdimensional intrusion, a being that exists primarily in a reality adjacent to our own, able to perceive and eventually interact with our world through reflective interfaces. Others propose more psychological explanations, that prolonged mirror gazing induces a state similar to self-hypnosis, making the mind vulnerable to suggestion or even possession. This doesn't explain the consistency of the experiences across time and culture, nor the physical evidence left behind in some cases, the temperature drops, the audio recordings of the distinctive jangling sound, the disappeared persons. Most disturbing is the entity's apparent awareness of documentation efforts. Throughout history, those who attempt to study, record, or expose its existence seem to draw its particular attention. Researchers disappear, recordings corrupt, evidence degrades. It doesn't want to be known, yet it seems to require being seen to exert its influence, which raises an uncomfortable question about this very video you're watching right now. You've spent minutes looking at a screen, a reflective surface, You focused your attention on the concept of this entity, perhaps even visualizing it as I've described its impossible joints and distinctive movements. Have you noticed any unusual reflections while watching? That movement at the edge of your screen that disappears when you turn to look directly at it? That faint jangling sound you might have attributed to something in your environment? I've taken precautions in creating this video. I've used specific audio frequencies that some researchers believe disrupt the entity's ability to fully materialize. I've carefully avoided certain visual patterns that might create a more conducive gateway, but I can't guarantee your safety, especially if you've watched this multiple times or in a darkened room where your screen becomes more reflective. If you've made it this far, you should know what to do if you encounter it. Don't maintain eye contact through the reflection. Cover or break the reflective surface immediately. Most importantly, don't look for it in other reflective surfaces afterward. This appears to strengthen its connection to you. Why release this information if it puts viewers at risk? Because silence has allowed this entity to operate unchecked for centuries. Each person who encounters it and disappears leaves no warning for others. Each researcher who discovers its patterns and vanishes takes that knowledge away. The cycle continues precisely because we don't speak of it. Perhaps there's safety in numbers. Perhaps widespread awareness might dilute its power or reveal a permanent solution. Or perhaps I'm simply ensuring I'm not its only target. If you're concerned after watching this, there's one thing witnesses throughout history have noted. The entity cannot materialize. Through a reflection, if others are present and observing the same surface, it appears exclusively to isolated individuals. So stay with others when near reflective surfaces, watch with friends, share what you've learned. If you've seen it, even a glimpse at the edge of a mirror or screen, comment, "I see joints" below this video. You'll find you're not alone. There are more of us than you might think, but be careful of looking too long at your screen while typing that comment. Be mindful of the reflective quality of your device in a darkened room. And if you hear a faint jangling sound, like small metal components shifting inside something that's drawing closer, look away. Turn on the lights. Break your own reflection. It might already be too late for me. I've spent months researching this entity, watching hours of corrupted footage, interviewing witnesses who later disappeared. Last night, I saw it in my bathroom mirror, just at the edge, its limbs bent at impossible angles, that unmistakable sound emanating from within its body. I've covered every reflective surface in my home, but I know that's just delaying the inevitable. This video is my testimony, my warning, my attempt to break the cycle of isolated encounters and disappeared witnesses. The Jangly Man has existed in our peripheral vision for centuries, taking those who notice it one by one. But perhaps together, we can finally face what watches us from just beyond the glass. Just remember, if you see unusual movement in reflective surfaces after watching this, if you hear that distinctive jangling sound when you're alone, you haven't discovered the entity. It's discovered you. Always watching, always waiting, listening for its name.